I keep having this recurring dream about my brother Chris coming back and being really, really happy. We have a party to celebrate. After the party, I go into the bedroom to go and sit on his bed and talk. And I discover a mask of his face lying on the bedside table. But it isn't really him.
I don't think anybody could imagine what a terrible sense of absolute despair there was of not knowing what had happened to my son.
It just didn't make sense. It didn't add up. Where could they be? We knew that somebody somewhere knew the truth.
It's like watching a horror movie, but it's real. You feel like you're hiding this secret that people would not understand. And what happened to Peta and Chris is a nightmare that you can't wake up from.
My brother, Chris, and his girlfriend, Peta, always wanted to travel, always.
Hello, everyone. What's the date today? It's the 29th of May.
Chris had a tape recorder, so he would send tapes back.
Greetings from the line. It's basically paradise. The markets are quite lively places. We're going to travel down the coast.
Chris was my cool older brother. There were three of us. Nigel was the oldest, I was the youngest, and Chris was in the middle, and I idolised him, I suppose. My father hated Chris's long hair. They often locked horns, but Chris really didn't care what other people thought of him. You know, loved his leather jacket, loved wearing silver boots, jeans, and you could never really hold him back. He hated boundaries.
He was a very lovable little boy. There was always a sense of excitement about him. From the age of 10, he decided to be a doctor. I was always very proud of him. He was very devoted to his girlfriend, Peta.
Chris and Peta met when they were 14 and became childhood sweethearts.
I met Peta in 1964 when we were 11. She had this Mona Lisa smile, very reserved, but underneath that exterior was this mischievous character, this twinkle in her eye. Soul music was the big thing. We loved it. She would go mental. That's what I loved about her, that sense of fun. And then Chris came along. They seemed to belong together.
He was probably not your conventional doctor. He was very much a party animal, and they were quite well known, I think, for their parties. They were adventurous, and they thought nothing of just getting in Chris's old banger of a car and just taking off, and they did. You know, they travelled across Europe and to Morocco and Tangier. They went to Australia and worked there for 6 months and then travelled down to Central America.
Well, I didn't like it at all. I mean, I don't think many parents would. Wasn't even too sure where Central America was, to be honest. But you can't clip a kid's wings. You've got to let them fly. So they went off with our blessings.
June 1978. Dear Mum, I'm now in Sardinia on the north coast of Belize.
Peta always wrote long letters to her mother, usually fortnightly, maybe more often.
Life is very slow here, and we shall probably stay until the end of the week. The sun is warm, the sky is a little cloudy, and the sea is emerald green.
People are very friendly indeed. You know, you've got fish in the sea. You've got all your fruit and vegetables growing behind you in the jungle. We heard stories of people who've gone out there just for a couple of weeks and ended up staying 2 or 3 months.
It was always very exciting hearing from them. These were strange places to us. For me, back at home, little 17-year-old, it all seemed very exciting and exotic.
That type of travel was unusual. They were going to completely foreign places, right out of your comfort zone.
Chris was a risk taker. He did go beyond what people would accept as being safe.
After that, still not quite sure. Might be going to Jamaica, might be going down to Peru.
You know, they were all over the place, really, depending on who they met. You know, it was all at a whim, always looking for the next new experience. They were very much children of the 70s. That whole buzz, that whole vibe, you know, free love and the music. But, you know, I think what came with that was a certain naivety. They couldn't conceive that anybody could harm them. 13th of June, 1978. All our plans have changed. An American called Dwayne offered to take us up to Chetumal by sail. We thought it was an opportunity not to be missed, especially as Chris wants sailing experience. No more news, I don't think, so we'll close now with all my love as ever. Pete.
We knew that in one of the bars in Belize, they'd met this man, Dwayne, Boston. They were going to sail with him down the coast. He had 2 boys in tow, Russell and Vince.
Can you tell me your name?
My name is Vince Boston. I had a weird childhood. We moved around a lot. We never stayed in one place for like more than a year. I hadn't seen my mom since I was 3, almost 4 years old. So it was my brother Ruz, me, and my dad, Silas Dwayne Boston, but everyone called him Dwayne. We had a lot of girlfriends, a lot of really good-looking women. He had that certain charisma, I guess, you know. They call it the Boston charm. I don't know, whatever. I think the best way to describe my dad is he acts like a big kid. 0 responsibilities, just wants to have fun and party and good times, you know. There's always these hippies in the house smoking pot, drinking, doing drugs. You know, we'd be sitting there in the living room and somebody would pass a joint over and I'd take a little hit. And the dad didn't care. He's like, yeah, you know, it's good for him, fuck him. I remember one Christmas, we had a little Charlie Brown Christmas tree, scrawny, but oh well, and we decorated it. We had Fruit Loops. We strung those through a thread. Christmas morning, under the tree, there was a brown paper bag. I opened it up, was this Viewmaster. You put these reels in and put a little cartridge thing to your eyes. You saw this amazing full color picture from 3 dimensions. And it was from Dad. It just meant to me that he cared in his own little way, you know. This stupid little Viewmaster in a paper bag that meant a lot to me. That was my favorite Christmas.
If you were to write a motto for Belize, it might be no sweat.
One day, I'm 12 years old, watching this television show about Belize.
If you can't remember where Belize is, you're probably not alone. It's in Central America, all right, just the other side of the Gulf of Mexico.
And we're, you know, tripping on it and loving it. And Dad said, hey, you guys want to go to Belize? And we both look at each other like, is he bullshitting us? Next thing you know, we got passports, got snorkels and fins, loaded up the truck and headed down to Belize. Belize, it's a beautiful country. It's the water's turquoise blue and crystal clear. Weather's perfect all the time. Dad bought a boat, the Justin B. And he'd been in the Navy, so he knew a lot of seamanship. We'd take tourists out on day trips, teach people how to spearfish, how to snorkel, how to scuba. Dad would basically turn into this devil-may-care, easygoing character where they would say, yeah, okay, this guy, he's a fucking hippie, I can see that, but at least he's legit. He kept calling us Pirates of the Caribbean. This is before the movies came out. And he was so proud of the fact that he was a pirate of the Caribbean. One day, we pull into Belize City. And I remember this British couple coming down the dock. They had their duffel bags and all their gear. They came on board and said, hello, here we are. I'm Chris. And she's like, hello, I'm Peta Frampton. Nice couple, fairly young, 25. He was a doctor, he said, and she was an attorney, and they were going to be on board for quite a while. A couple weeks, I think.
Dear Mum, we have just set off and the sea is somewhat choppy, so my writing may go haywire. Chris has been doing a lot of sailing.
The sailing's really very good fun, except I think I need a lot more practice at it.
Chris was very fond of sailing, which was a legacy of our holidays in Anglesey.
I always remember he and I just taking the boat out on our own too far, out of the bay, out of sight. But that was Chris pushing boundaries. He did go too far.
Chris was very easygoing, really cool guy, easy to get along with. He was there for the ride. He loved the adventure. He wanted to steer the boat, grab the tiller. We taught him the ropes, literally. Okay, this is how you sail, this is how you navigate. Chris had this giant boombox that he loved. And it was always cranking out some mixtapes that he had from, I guess, recording from his LP collection back home. And playing Pink Floyd or ELO or Santana or whatever. And it was like, yeah, this is groovy. We love this kind of music, you know, and we're dancing on board. It's fun when you have somebody on board that's really into it. And I really admired his adventurous spirit. Peta was a little bit more reserved. She would kind of hang back and sun herself or write letters.
During the day, it's super just lying on the hatches and soaking up the sun whilst the boat flies along. We had a perfect sail. Chris wants me to say this was due to his superb navigation.
I would jump into this beautiful crystal clear water and we'd spearfish. And at the end of the day, I would make a nice meal of rice and beans and whatever we caught. Dad was, oh man, this is awesome. We're sailing, drinking Jamaican rum, partying. This is the life. For every now and again you want to go into port, they would both come in and she would drop off her letters and go shopping. You get tired of a place, you just pull up anchor and go somewhere else.
Doing some coral reef diving on a little island, I suppose I must have seen about 400 different sorts of fish and lots of amazingly coloured coral. The only thing you've got to watch out for is a few sharks, but they shouldn't be too much problem.
They were travelling around, going to all the keys, these little islands off Belize, just lapping it all up really and just really enjoying life.
I can remember I was missing him. The house felt very flat without him. But they'd been snorkeling and swimming and really enjoying the life, so they were happy.
It's incredibly hot here, but at night, the sky is absolutely amazing. There's lightning flashing on the horizon all the time. Just looks beautiful. We've had thunderstorms as well, which is something on a boat.
Since they'd stayed on longer, we got to know them better, right? You know, we were like a little tight crew and we all had our jobs to do. So I think they really enjoyed it at first, yeah. I remember that Peta asked, so aren't you going to school? Aren't you missing school? She wanted to volunteer to be our onboard tutor. You know, some knuckle-headed American kids that didn't know nothing, and that was her gift to us, I guess. On board, my dad was the captain, and we were just the crew, and we were obligated to follow his every order. The captain is the god. You follow what the captain says, or it's called mutiny. You had to swab the decks, you had to maintain the paint. This boat would slowly leak, and this ugly, smelly black water would seep in. Every day, if you didn't bilge, you could eventually sink, so you had to be up on that. It's a life and death thing, you know. We didn't have any radios, no way of communicating, so we were kind of out there on our own. Anything that goes wrong, we're toast. Dad would spend a lot of time getting drunk. He would kind of sulk, and then he would turn into this Jekyll and Hyde type character. Alcohol, whatever it was, would activate this asshole in him. Nothing was ever good enough for him, you know. He would yell at Russ or I, why didn't you tie the knot this way? Or why didn't you pull the anchor up this way? It was like a storm that would come in and you weren't prepared for it. You just had to be careful not to cross that line and wake up the dragon or whatever. My dad, you gotta understand, he was a very prolific burglar, breaking into people's houses. He was brought up that way. My grandfather, his father before him, was a criminal, running illegal hooch back in the Prohibition. Whereas maybe a normal dad would teach his kid how to play catch or something. Dad would want me to go breaking into people's houses with them. I didn't want to do it. You know, I wasn't part of that. Dad was pissed off about that. He would say things like, I don't think that you're my son. You can't be my son because you want to be good. You know, you're just too goody-goody. So my nickname was Goody Two Shoes.
Pete wrote a letter. The boat was very small. They were all pretty well living on top of one another.
We sleep in the galley, a space about 4 by 5 by 2.5 feet.
Peter was getting a little bit irritated at lack of privacy.
Like all boats, this one has cockroaches. And it's horrible when we turn on the kerosene lamp and they come out. We spray every day, but they come out to die.
First it's paradise, and then after a while it's like, okay, another day, another day, another day. You know, it's like every day you see the same water, you see the same boat, you see the same person. It's like, okay, there's another sunrise, there's another sunset, okay, whatever.
Another reason I wouldn't mind ending my sailing career now is the 2 sons of Dwayne. They're 12 and 13 years, but behave more like 8 and 9. They squabble most of the time, and I find I just have no patience at all with them. What makes it worse is that Dwayne curses and puts them down continually. But on a boat, there's nowhere you can go.
The boys were very quarrelsome. Austin was very angry.
He would put you into a classification of either good people if they were criminals. But if they were law-abiding, those are blue bloods. Fucking blue bloods. He thought that they were looking down on him. And they did. They did look down on him. When things go wrong, little quirks in people's personality get on your nerves, and you can't go anywhere. Where are you gonna go? You could tell just by her expression that Peta was a little bit over the novelty of being on board. Not too emotional, stiff upper lip and all that, you know. But there's a little bit of passive aggressiveness, you could tell. I think, yeah, she's kind of done.
June the 29th. Pete wrote that they decided to change their plans and go to Livingston in Guatemala. And then Peter was going to catch a flight to New Orleans, and Chris was going to go on to Trinidad.
Yeah, well, we'll be glad to get away, she said. Nothing much happens on a boat.
We had been sailing around different islands, just exploring for a few weeks. Especially Peta was anxious to get off the boat and stretch her legs.
29th of June, 1978. We reached Hunting Key at about 11 a.m. We're docked about 50 yards offshore and the water is perfectly clear.
It was a very beautiful island. I think the name of it was Hunting Key. When we first get there, it's, of course, me and my dad and Russ and Chris and Peta and the lighthouse keeper. And I said, yeah, man, they'll be having a big party here, man, later. Yeah, you're all invited. Come stay, you know, we have a big party. They were having a pig roast. They stuck an apple in its mouth and put it on a spit, and everyone was having roast pig. All the adults were drinking and dancing, and we had the music blaring, and it's like, wow, really? This is cool. was having a good time and smoking pot, doing drugs. Quaaludes were being passed around. There was a lot of debauchery. I remember there was these two very drunk Guatemalan girls. They were beautiful. They're in bikinis, scantily clad, and they were standing in the surf, kissing each other. And I'm like, Russ, look at that. We'd never seen that before, right? Oh my gosh, two girls kissing each other? And then they started taking each other's top off. We're like, oh my God, how far is this gonna go? Dad was drunk and dancing around the bonfire, life of the party. Chris and Peta were having a wonderful time, very drunk and dancing. As she let her hair down and was in the flow of the party. Dad was talking about all these crazy ghost stories. He had smuggled in all of these nitrous oxide cartridges, and he had tossed one of these cartridges in the bonfire. And after a while, they started exploding. Kaboom, boom. Dad was dancing around like he was conjuring up some kind of magic. It's like, yes, white magic. At that point, I didn't know what was going to happen next.
Peter sent a letter that was dated June the 29th. That was the last we heard from them. The letters stopped. We didn't hear anything at all, and we started to get concerned. It was just that inability to reach out to them. It's hard to think nowadays that you couldn't get in touch with them, but there was just no means of doing so. Every day when the post came, there was a searching for an airmail envelope or some news from them. There was just nothing. By the end of August, we were all very worried. We went to Anglesey on holiday. We came back from Anglesey expecting a letter, but there was nothing there.
We thought, were they unwell? That some sort of accident must have befallen them.
Weeks went by with no word. The last letter was postmarked from Livingston in Guatemala. We knew it was a fairly dangerous place to be, that there was a civil war raging. They had got visas in Belize to go to Honduras, so it was never their intention to go to Guatemala. Our fears just began to grow and grow.
I felt desperate, absolutely desperate, so helpless, really. When Chris was 3, he fell out of the bedroom window to the ground floor. I remember hearing the thud and dashing downstairs. I thought first, of course, he was dead. But actually fell onto a garden table, and that had broken his fall. That's always etched on my memory. You think you've covered every eventuality, such as falling downstairs or, I don't know, being run over, but an open window was nothing that had ever occurred to me. And never forgave myself for that. Now we're missing. You don't know what to do. You don't know who to turn to.
One day I was called into my boss's office in Special Branch at police headquarters. He explained to me how 2 young British people had gone missing in Guatemala and said he would like me to try and find them. The plain fact is that several things could have happened to them. Guatemala were at that time in the middle of a violent civil war. There was serious drug and gang problems there, and large areas of jungle. To all intents and purposes, it's totally lawless. They could have been kidnapped. They could have simply got lost somewhere in the jungle. So now just to keep an absolutely open mind on what might have happened to them.
My father worked for the BBC in Manchester, in the news department. He just threw himself into it.
Charles was in contact with newspapers and things.
The couple are Dr. Chris Farmer and his girlfriend, law graduate Peta Frampton, who are both 25. Peter and Chris have been friends since childhood. They even went to the same university. And according to Chris's mother, it was there that the urge to travel the world was born.
It was their one idea that as soon as they graduated, that they would travel as extensively as they could.
It was headline news. Here were these two good-looking young graduates with everything to live for, missing on the other side of the world.
The TV was on. The two of them were missing. It was a terrible shock.
They travelled down through Mexico to Belize, where they hitched a ride on a converted fishing boat owned by an American.
It would be a letter that arrived in the middle of July, but it had been written at the end of June, and there was a gap of about nearly 3 weeks between the writing and the actual posting.
Night after night, my father would sit at the bureau writing letters to anyone he could think of.
We just wrote to every consul down the coast of Central America, Guatemala, Belize.
We started thinking maybe one of them had fallen ill or, they were in jail for something. The Foreign and Commonwealth Office made extensive inquiries. Dad employed a private detective to look at all the tourist haunts along the Belizean coast, Guatemala, Honduras.
We wrote to the harbour master at Hunting Key. We contacted weather stations to see if there'd been any storms. The boat might have been damaged. But all we could do was find any information about what could have happened to Chris and Pete.
I didn't have detectives working for me in the area where they'd gone missing. So I had to rely on the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office. They were already helping Charles Farmer to try and find out what had happened to the pair. But it all drew a blank. However, Charles was a very well-educated, clever man. He'd have made a good detective, actually. He handed over quite a large file of documents from his own inquiries. The most important document that he handed to me was a port document showing the Justin B leaving Belize on the 26th, with its captain shown as Dwayne Boston. On board at the time were Christopher, Peter, and Boston's two young sons, Vince and Russell. The next we knew, from the port record, it sailed into Livingston on the 6th of July, but Christopher and Peter were not aboard.
The harbour master said that he remembered Chris and Pete being signed on this boat, the Justin B. Something had happened to them between Hunting Key and Livingston.
So it was logical that we needed to find out from Boston where they'd left the boat.
It would seem that the key to all this, the key to the mystery of their whereabouts, is the boat owner.
Well, this is what is being hoped for by the police, that they're trying to contact him to actually pin down where he landed them.
We discovered from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office that Boston had left Livingston on July the 19th. He had sold the boat. The next thing we knew was that he had gone back to Sacramento. And then, in October, They interviewed him. He said that he had put them ashore in Guatemala, across the bay from Livingston. He said also that Chris and Peter were drug addicts, drug pushers, that they'd left the boat and that was it.
The skipper of the boat alleged that they were taking drugs at their own request. He had dropped them off at a peninsula, Punta de Manibique, which is largely uninhabited. Why they should drop off at such a remote place struck me as being odd. But
Central America at the time was certainly regarded as a major drug smuggling route.
America's public enemy number one is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
Without informing the Greater Manchester Police, the DEA opened a file on Chris and Peter as being suspected drug smugglers. Seemingly the DEA had seen that Chris and Peter had travelled through Morocco, another significant smuggling route, and together with Boston testimony, suspicions were raised.
I mean, yeah, they smoked marijuana, hands up, they did, yeah. You know, they smoked dope. But then I think it wasn't out of the norm in the 70s to smoke joints. Were they drug pushers? No, no way.
I thought they may have fallen into the hands of villains, maybe been robbed. They could have been arrested by the authorities. You know, where you've got drugs and money, then sadly, police officers can be corrupted.
It became an all-consuming passion for my father, really, to find out what had happened. My parents pleaded with the Foreign Office to interview the boys, but they didn't. So he decided to get the phone number for Boston, and he made a call.
Charles recorded that conversation. The phone rang, and Boston's father answered. He was called Russell Boston.
You're Mr. Russell Boston.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you're the father of Mr. Boston.
Yeah.
So obviously, as Dwayne was the last person, I would just like to have a chat with him and ask him just whereabouts and this sort of thing, you see.
Has anyone ever told you to look in Colombia?
In Colombia?
Yeah.
Well, you see, the last news we had was that Dwayne had dropped them just short of Livingston.
Then they were on dope. He told me, he says, I met hundreds and hundreds of them kind of people down there, and he says some of them would go out on those poppy farms or marijuana farms, and he says they might be out there for a year or two.
You have no address for your son, though?
No, but I can get a hold of him. If you write a letter here, I'll see that he gets the letter.
Sure thing. Many thanks indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I was very suspicious of the responses. I mean, I felt he's hiding something. Why would he hide something? But at the end of the day, Chris and Peter had been missing for months in a country like Guatemala. Boston and his two sons had disappeared. There was no evidence that he had committed a crime. And the truth of the matter, what I could do was very limited, because we had absolutely no jurisdiction in the matter.
Inquiries have so far produced nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. From the time that the last letter was written, just an utter blank.
All that both families can do is wait and wonder what has happened to Peter and Chris.
Any news would have been better than no news. As a family, we couldn't come to terms with anything, really, not knowing where they were. We were in limbo.
What were you going through, Audrey?
Hell, in a word. I don't know. How can you describe it? I just remember looking up at the stars and thinking, is there no sign of anything, any reason, or you just think that surely there'll be some sign or somebody who must have seen them. Couldn't imagine what we were about to find out.
My father took the phone call. He just crumpled, really. Yeah, just didn't really cry, just crumpled. Back in July of the previous year, 2 bodies had been discovered floating 200 metres off the peninsula at Punta de Manabique. And they'd been buried unidentified. They'd been found with obvious signs of torture, and Peta's body had a plastic bag over her head.
I remember I was at work at the clinic, and when the police rang up and said that it was Chris and Pete. And I can remember driving back from the clinic and shouting to the empty car, my son has been murdered, my son has been murdered. And then the next day, I went back to work as normal.
That was it, that was the end. They were not coming back.
This was a whole new ballgame. This was now a murder. They had died from asphyxia due to submersion. In other words, they were drowned. They were bound hand and foot, and they were attached to pieces of heavy machinery on the seabed.
I was very, very angry. I really was. We wanted justice.
We were all grieving in our own individual ways, but one question was in all our heads. Just the question, why? It just didn't make sense. It didn't add up. What could possibly have gone so wrong? Why were these 2 kids tortured and murdered?
All I can do is tell the story of what I saw in front of my own eyes. To tell the truth as I remember it.
I was much. Well, my though, with you.
And it has with the first hell it absolutely is I met you. Where the loch not is looking at you now be there where floor will over night out. It answers to it. Man Murph seen muscle. Oh, well, of Malaya manner, finished us with me act surf and the way you Passing it was me, man, such with the mother starting second look be easy. I don't get this lost. Mother squash, you receive the limit as such as it. Nurse, I can trust you. It's not opening it in. I handed you. What's the talent? Man Murphy, you saw so up. Ja, nicht noch nicht das jetzt so das alles das die.
Sky, if I had S01, did you know, fast. There's time, there's time, I can fingers now, because we kill on us, and that's what I move. We'll skid it or see a lot worse time that. Off and off, but this is destructive, you know, sauce, this is destructive, just now, this again. See the one it'll come today. Zero, so like he's here, see what I'm gonna so that. Heater off with the wolf, and they still was that. Well, I drink her, at least. Yes, nice, Nick. Nars, you're right. I'm asking for no one. I never heard what he's missing. Heater off with the film. Her off and off, and I'm nice, Nick. Nars, so that. Oh, I can access 05. I go on. I'll still listen. Yes, there are some. There, that's easy. Slaughter. Who's. And these are new ethical sound. Come on, that. That's music. First, and then answer with us, and then I'll feel next to any. Was that? Or be slightly all in that. Last name, Mr. That I don't name, sir. Sir, ethnic, sir, funeral. He's not so many in the law for the year of the.
I'll if I say so when I was like 5 squad. Nej, أنا بلش عارف إيش نحشي ريو. إيش بس نحن عن هنريش نحن نحن.
Skeller starts to go up before I get this yes, so he feels absolutely. Skewy for her, narrow, Snella on her face, snire, rungelis, sniff, do.
I'm your son. This is your next time.
Laden is no connects with circuna. Sneeloin is Yalp's next, so was the Nana. Alarm talking at single snap at the gas. Yet, as there we. Ja, nicht noch nicht.
Not Phoenix, who's saying it. Why, Snicky's in the circle of half, but it will listen to them. I want to feel the purpose. Want to show moves. They're knocking you. Face will under the road that will somebody, and the sharp scare helps us fly, Snicky. I'm gonna do your work. We know we're going to be in this man, you know, like you line of surface will be from the circle. Little. Nah, rocks and no. I know I still did get. There's you that. I know I can kill her with this thought. Still will nick off. Still will preserve. Get out ball or with it up. Want to make her with it. Oh, beef look worthy. Fun shake of a sock. Oh, no, you do it.
Hier is een smoke, je hebt zelf.
Ja, ik niet naar wensen. Sterven of zo. Jullie is niet maar of ze zeggen ja, dat is zo. Is geen op. Maar de woord is een chef en was het ja, ja, maar dat ze hem ook zit. Ja, en is die al weer hebben. Zij niet dat een vrouw staat. Ja, het was een nassuus te zitten. Want er gelezen om je net niet te gaan zien dan.
Right away, that's not Sri there, not Sri Lanka, there, class. That's Sir Master your Master you're all Master yeah, you're reckless, honey. Yes, brother, yes, brother, yes, brother, yes, Skill still hours finding the sea out there, sister.
Ja, dus waar mag je dat? Ja, je vet erfsie. Dus waar mag je dat maar niet terecht en dan je maar overal zien. Sister, ook zeggen op sister, boekgeld.
Yes, the African, said the history. Stable in the security.
Je vraagt dus ja, boven, waar besef ze eigenlijk niet ziet.
Nou, was maar je wil weer verloren met. Oh, serieus, we hebben. Dat is zelfs meer hier.
So she's needed. So, man, you know, Boston. He look, this is me. We, money. Even we. Second, some me make it. No, some you think more out, girls, and you this to it. 5 before 6, so nice. They're off, was the one, honey. They're only that.
Suzuki Kebe, Nimika Mo. Kakukugai, Wakaki e Arus Nastato. Resuscitagina poto sami Kasaki kono kisiki alitamato Sa puso sana ika Debukeri Sano kawa Sota sita Shukro sasono Kusiganiki Kusemakawa Buko basota Papu papuka
I don't know, this thought when I heard was you name McVeigh, so you never read about it. I think it's fellas. Yeah, I'm not playing for the day. Well, I can't see you'll sniff at the dicky slow, nearly fed you right. No, he's still hurt all meal. I'm sealed up. Sitting there. Heal all snooped up. Van is niet dus dat is guys de bouwste dus dat je nu in box girl zes en spijker is nog wel af me August in de spijker je rijdt wel af met de negel waar uur is sister we went de spijker is zo right ja girl not I guess I was figure so I if I know I didn't they can carry me to that hook on the side. Reduce drove not drive the rest of the nose. Excuse me, excuse me, who's not was Steve leather member. I surfed and I was nailer with me, not my OS. There's this much there that how you knew, yes. Full little color, like you're her and I've made this like you. Her no, this.
Du hebben nog niet naast Klaus moord net nach wie wolf drie spulse. Nou achtergo en de server hem lang is half niet jalze. Je zie hem wel ze ja hey oh heel weer niet dit.
Hier how is it? Fjallin joos neder. Nangje wils, nangje ons niet. Mijn slaadus half vier plus slagen. Mijn sims er wel.
Fjallin joos neder. Sich neder allo en je hals. Ziel vasten leal te zien. Zie genoeg niet maar wanneer was het weer.
Of some with you, she is the old master out of it, or off the luck in museum for the honest on shift as Austin if it didn't have 5 minutes systems or something than all of it. When I'm getting out, fear rock and see it.
Slayer almost like you're near love to see else, but better ask the you pass you and there the other 5 hours this. And then I make love do it. Growth, but no, can only neck and handy growth. Ja, wat is het? Nee, daar. Maar de campus niet eerst. Lees. Roma stocks is een name. Maar zo daar. Vaak hoor we dat we niet in Seattle. Veel in Seattle kan doen. Ja, dat er niet de. Chef is nieuw. Er al weer goed. Hopefully, zit er is much new out.
Nashia van the Russe is serious news no sir. Last ever you. All the alf episode nas and business is among all such a miss the air the news.
Sir out there for flies turn us. I've me and I do stress the wrong but little so ask you. There's never sick there I'm dealer but those nailers that are old now you know myself you know enough. Girl, not a snack room when I can see my next is value you. This is I goes it. Spin there by the run, I snatched her all light or the elf, elf, that. Mark, I've missed out. Keep was in her from your oak of second on Murphy. He this skin line here. See also had slowly this album snares said that's there. Yeah, I think that's like see us in here. Little slower than Roscoe. Her list is back up, but there's sitting over here, Snap did well with me, our other friends. We still not what I can see, go killer. Like you see here, it's
if you start it, we there's not me shoot there, so I it's not, yeah, but it's not. If you are on a slash web and you get to down the members do it.
Yes, look at it, it's a lot. Race again, as a shoe. Nearly from off your episode.
It's just has his tack home already right now. That's enough. Here, if you lose in the left.
The last is holding everything you pursue. Oh, yeah, we're again, you still around this. You pushed almost the east and the first has to be you. My mate.